One of the real revolutions of the 60s that didn't get noticed as much as more obvious things was this enormous expansion of media.
In Vietnam, we would sit around, and that's how we would meet people. We'd have our individual record players, and we'd put on our favorite music. And we'd meet and start to get to know each other, and it was a communal thing.
We'd have the FM on, and we'd just swing across the band to see what's going on, and we found KMPX in San Francisco.
This former classical music disc jockey from Detroit named Larry Miller had been leasing the nighttime slot on a foreign language station called KMPX on the FM dial.
Being on the all-night show gave me an awful lot of elbow room to do what we now think of as free-form radio, because it was free-form. It wasn't just folk rock, British Invasion, and so forth, San Francisco psychedelic, and so on. It was a chance to really mess with people's heads.
It was album music. It wasn't top 40. And he talked really slow, man. He was like so very cool, man.
There were tight, rigid rules in radio at that time, and it was really popular. And they said, no, not only are we going to give you music in stereo from all of this music that's available, that's taking off all over the world, album music, but we're going to throw away all the rules, and we're not going to talk like polished DJs, we're going to talk like real people.
I think the best radio was always, you're talking to one person. You know, you're not talking to this crowd out there, which is the difference between AM and FM delivery.
At KSAN, because I was an AM guy, I came in and gave time checks. And I remember people coming and saying, who cares what time it is? Well, most people did, because it went from being sort of an all-night show for hookers to being an actual morning show where people got up and listened.
The minute I got to San Francisco and settled down and turned on the radio, it went right to KSAN. And I said, that's it. Bingo.
My brother had given me my first FM radio, you know. So I'm just going up and down the dial one day, and I hear the Jefferson Airplane, and followed by Bob Dylan and John Coltrane. And I went, what the hell is this?
Things that busted out of their categories, and all of a sudden you could play anything at any time.
I think the first time I heard Flatt and Scruggs and Bill Monroe was on some late night folk music show.
It was like a tribal campfire that you would gather around. Your people would gather around this, and it was a real meeting place.
Well, as far as mixing weird music together, I think I mainly started learning how to do that just in college, doing college radio.
When I hear music, I think of different colors. And so I want to make sure that the color of the music is always changing so that it's not the same color too long.
The radio stations and the programmers and jocks were looking for the same thing that the customers were looking for, is where was this music coming from?
FM provided us with like a home base worldwide. A worldwide home base, because it was new and we were new.
It was a great thing for broadening people's appreciation of music and for creating opportunities for musicians to play for audiences that had previously been unavailable to them.
We were lucky in the sense that the timing for the release of our album coincided with the advent of the previously ignored FM radio band, which all of a sudden started to sprout these alternative format radio stations.
Long before the internet, it was these radio stations that gave us this social network.
The college crowd, I think, were the big movers and shakers of the late 60s, because they were the ones who began experimenting on their own college stations, and eventually commercial radio picked up on it.
KUOP, which was left on the dial, which is University Pacific radio station, played jams on the weekend during the day. Now, trying to find KUOP, I stumbled upon 90.3 FM, KDVS, by accident. The richness of freeform radio comes in the lack of a commercial motive to bring you the music that you're hearing. It's purely like an aesthetic thing, you know?
It's all challenging to the mainstream, which is what freeform radio was saying, well, you don't have to fit everything into a box. Don't have to have all 3-minute songs, and you don't have to have something everyone wants to hear, and you can expose people to things.
In '68, stations were springing up all over the country, and for some reason they were looking to KSAN and what was left of KMPX, KPPC in Pasadena, which was doing the same stuff.
If you look across the country in those days, what were there? Maybe 25 stations or not even that many that you would think of in different cities who were doing some approximation of freeform, because everybody had a slightly different take on what that meant.
And the idea of doing music in sets, rather than play a song and talk, but play a set, then stop and do stuff, that had evolved into like 3 20-minute sets an hour. And everybody was doing it that way.
One of the reasons that I learned a lot more about music was because at a certain point, young women began to call. And that was, you know, nobody understands rock and roll better than a teenage girl, man. Nobody.
I mean, Dylan would say, let's go up on Bob Fast's show. You know, like, what are we going to do tonight? Instead of going to the bar, we'd go up to Bob Fast, and you know, we weren't even invited.
I'm supposed to be the father of freeform radio, but do you think one of those bastards, one of them sent me a Father's Day card? No.
There was no playlist. There was no guidelines. It was free form, baby. Whatever you like, you can play it. And that was pretty much it.